Case non-curtain, the Paston Letters. In 1735, a British antiquarian named Francis Blomefield was researching Norfolk history when he stumbled upon something extraordinary in a neglected manor house. Stuffed into old chests and scattered across damp rooms were over 1,000 letters, many still bearing their original wax seals, written by 3 generations of the Paston family between 1422 and 1509. These weren't the correspondence of kings or nobles. The Pastons were middle-class farmers who clawed their way into the gentry during one of England's most turbulent centuries. Their letters document everything: land disputes, marriage negotiations, requests for money, complaints about servants, and first-hand accounts of the Wars of the Roses. One letter from 1471 describes the Battle of Barnet in vivid detail, written just days after the fighting ended. For historians, the Paston Letters became a goldmine. They revealed that medieval people weren't so different from us. They worried about their children's education, complained about in-laws, and argued about money. Margaret Paston wrote over 100 letters to her husband John, providing one of the most complete pictures of medieval domestic life ever discovered. Skeptics have questioned the authenticity of some letters, noting that the collection passed through several hands before being properly cataloged. A few scholars in the 19th century suggested certain passages were embellished or forged to increase the collection's value. The handwriting analysis, however, has consistently supported their authenticity. Conspiracy theorists take a different angle. They argue the letters were deliberately hidden by the family because they contained information about property claims that could have disrupted noble inheritances for centuries. The seals, they say, weren't preservation, they were suppression. The evidence suggests something simpler. A family kept their correspondence, and time did the rest. Sometimes the past survives by accident. Case number 9, the Vinland Map Authentication Letter. In 1957, an American book dealer named Lawrence Whitten acquired a strange medieval map that appeared to show the northeastern coast of North America, drawn roughly 50 years before Columbus set sail. Attached to it was a sealed letter of provenance, supposedly written in the 15th century, authenticating the map's origins. The map, if genuine, would prove that Norse explorers not only reached America, but that European cartographers knew about it well before 1492. Yale University purchased the map and its accompanying documents in 1965 for approximately $1 million, making it one of the most expensive medieval artifacts ever sold. The authentication letter described the map as a copy of an earlier work created for the Council of Basel in the 1440s. It named specific church officials and provided a chain of custody that seemed almost too perfect. When scientists analyzed the ink in 1974, they found traces of anatase titanium dioxide, a compound not synthesized until the 1920s. Yale initially stood by the map's authenticity, and subsequent tests in 1985 muddied the waters by suggesting that titanium might occur naturally. The debate has continued for decades, with radiocarbon dating in 2002 confirming the parchment itself dates to approximately 1434. The conspiracy theory is elegant. Some researchers believe the map is genuine, but the authentication letter is a modern forgery, created to give the map a credible backstory and increase its sale price. The forger, they argue, was sophisticated enough to use medieval parchment, but made a critical error with modern ink. The authentication letter remains sealed from further destructive testing by Yale's current policies. Until that changes, we have a map that might rewrite history and a letter that might be the cleverest forgery of the 20th century. Case number 8, the Borgia Cipher Letters. In 1891, Italian archivist Giovanni Battista de Rossi was cataloging Vatican documents when he discovered a leather pouch containing 7 letters, each sealed with the Borgia family crest and written entirely in cipher. The letters were dated between 1494 and 1498, the height of Rodrigo Borgia's reign as Pope Alexander VI. The cipher proved remarkably sophisticated for its era, combining substitution codes with null characters designed to mislead decryption attempts. It took cryptographers nearly 30 years to crack it. When they finally did, the contents were explosive. Detailed instructions for poisoning political rivals, financial arrangements with foreign powers, and explicit references to the Pope's illegitimate children. The letters appeared to confirm every dark rumor ever whispered about the Borgias. Cesare Borgia's ruthlessness, Lucrezia's involvement in family schemes, the Pope's corruption, all laid bare in his own hand. Historians immediately raised objections. The Cipher system, while complex, seemed too modern for the 1490s. Several references in the letters mentioned events that hadn't yet occurred when they were supposedly written, and the leather pouch showed signs of 19th century tanning methods. The prevailing scholarly opinion is that the letters were forged probably in the early 19th century when anti-papal sentiment ran high in Italian nationalist circles. The forger had excellent knowledge of Borgia history, but made subtle chronological errors. Some Vatican researchers disagree. They point out that the parchment has been carbon dated to the correct period and suggest the anachronistic references might indicate the letters were copies, not originals. The Vatican has declined to make the letters available for comprehensive, modern analysis. The Borgia cipher letters remain locked in the Vatican archives, their seals intact for over 5 centuries, or perhaps just over one. Case Mer 7, the Mary Queen of Scots. Casket letters. In June 1567, Scottish nobles seized a silver casket from a servant of James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell. Inside were 8 letters and several poems, allegedly written by Mary Queen of Scots to Bothwell. If authentic, they proved Mary conspired to murder her husband, Lord Darnley, and was romantically involved with Bothwell before Darnley's death. The letters were devastating. They described Mary's hatred for Darnley in explicit terms and appeared to outline the assassination plot. Elizabeth I of England used them as primary evidence to justify keeping Mary imprisoned for 19 years, ultimately leading to her execution in 1587. Mary denied writing them. She demanded to see the originals, to confront her accusers, to have the letters examined by impartial experts. Elizabeth refused every request. The original letters vanished sometime around 1584, and we have only copies and translations made by Mary's enemies. Skeptics have had a field day. The letters contain factual errors, awkward phrasing, and passages that contradict Mary's known movements. Handwriting analysis is impossible without originals. The Scottish nobles who produced the letters had every reason to forge them. They had just overthrown their queen and needed justification. The conspiracy runs deeper. Some historians believe genuine letters from Mary to Bothwell existed, but were altered and supplemented with forgeries. The silver casket itself was real, but what was originally inside may have been innocent correspondence transformed into evidence of murder. Mary Stuart went to her death proclaiming her innocence. The casket letters determined the fate of a queen, and we will never see the originals to judge for ourselves. The most consequential letters in Scottish history disappeared precisely when they could have been properly examined. Case Number 6, the Abraham Lincoln letter to Queen Victoria. In 1865, just weeks after Abraham Lincoln's assassination, Queen Victoria wrote a personal letter of condolence to Mary Todd Lincoln. The grieving widow replied with a letter that was sealed and placed in the royal archives, where it remained unread for over a century. When historians finally examined the correspondence in the 1970s, they discovered something unexpected. The file contained not 2 letters but 3, including what appeared to be a previously unknown letter from Lincoln himself to Queen Victoria, dated February 1865, discussing potential British mediation in the final months of the Civil War. The implications were significant. Lincoln had publicly opposed any foreign involvement in the conflict, viewing it as strictly an American matter. A secret letter exploring British mediation would suggest a more pragmatic or desperate Lincoln than history remembered. Archivists noted problems immediately. The paper stock, while period appropriate, came from a manufacturer that primarily supplied British, not American customers. The handwriting matched Lincoln's known samples but seemed almost too perfect, lacking the variations typical of his authentic letters. The seal used wax consistent with British, not American formulations. The official position is that the letter was likely forged by a British sympathizer hoping to demonstrate that Lincoln had sought their help. It may have been inserted into the file decades after the original condolence exchange, possibly during the reorganization of royal archives in 1914. Some Lincoln scholars disagree. They argue the letter's content aligns with private statements Lincoln made to his cabinet, and that its existence explains certain British diplomatic maneuvers in early 1865 that have never been fully understood. The Royal Archives have declined to authorize further testing. The letter sits in its folder, sealed from conclusive judgment. A might have been in envelope form. Case number 5. The Dead Sea Scrolls Copper Scroll. In March 1952, archaeologists exploring Cave 3 near Qumran discovered something unlike any other Dead Sea Scroll. 2 rolled sheets of pure copper, heavily oxidized and impossible to unroll without destruction. For 3 years, the scroll sat unopened while scientists debated how to read it. In 1955, Professor H. Wright Baker of Manchester University cut the copper into 23 strips using a specialized saw. What they found was not scripture, but a treasure map, a detailed list of 64 locations where gold, silver, and sacred vessels had supposedly been hidden, totaling an estimated 160 tons of precious metal. The scroll listed specific landmarks: a courtyard, a cistern beneath a dovecote, a tomb in the Valley of Ahor. The treasure included gold bars, silver coins, consecrated vessels, and priestly garments. Some scholars calculated the total value at over $1 billion in modern currency. Here is where it gets strange. The copper scroll was written in a different Hebrew dialect than other Qumran documents. Its concerns were material, not spiritual. It seemed out of place among religious texts, as if it had been hidden with the scrolls by accident or for safekeeping. Skeptics argue the treasure never existed. The quantities are impossibly large, the locations deliberately vague, and the scroll may be a work of fiction or wishful thinking by a community about to be destroyed by Roman forces in 68 CE. Treasure hunters prefer a different interpretation. They believe the scroll documents the hidden treasury of the Jerusalem temple, concealed before the Roman siege. Several expeditions have searched the locations described, finding nothing conclusive, though excavations near site number 32 did uncover an ancient tunnel system in 1962. 64 locations, 160 tons of treasure, a map that survived 2,000 years. Either the greatest hoax in archaeological history or directions to a fortune still waiting to be found. Case number 4. The Newton Alchemy Papers. When Isaac Newton died in 1727, he left behind a massive collection of personal papers that his family immediately sealed away. They knew what those papers contained, and they knew it could destroy his reputation. For over 200 years, the documents remained hidden, passing through private hands until economist John Maynard Keynes purchased them at auction in 1936. What Keynes found shocked him. Newton, the father of modern physics, the man who gave us calculus and the laws of motion, had spent more time studying alchemy than mathematics. The papers included thousands of pages of alchemical experiments, recipes for transmuting metals, and detailed interpretations of biblical prophecy. Newton's sealed correspondence was particularly revealing. Letters to fellow alchemist Robert Boyle discussed their shared belief that ancient priests had possessed secret knowledge of nature's fundamental forces. Newton wrote that he was close to discovering the philosophical mercury that would unlock matter's deepest secrets. The scientific establishment was horrified. Newton's biographers had carefully constructed an image of pure rationality, and these papers threatened to recast him as a medieval mystic dabbling in superstition. Some historians argue the papers show Newton was simply a man of his time, when the boundaries between science and mysticism were blurred. His alchemical experiments, they note, were conducted with the same rigor as his physics work. The conspiracy theory is more intriguing. Certain Newton scholars believe his alchemical research actually informed his physics, that his understanding of forces acting at a distance came from alchemical concepts of invisible attraction. The papers were sealed in this view, not because they were embarrassing, but because they revealed that modern science has occult roots. Newton wrote more about alchemy than physics. That fact was hidden for 2 centuries. The question is why? Case number 3. The Voynich manuscript accompanying letters. In 1912, rare book dealer Wilfrid Voynich purchased a collection of manuscripts from a Jesuit college in Italy. Among them was a 240-page book written in an unknown script, illustrated with bizarre plants, astronomical diagrams, and naked women bathing in green liquid. But Voynich also found something else. A letter sealed inside the book's cover, dated 1665 or 1666. The letter from Johannes Marcus Marci to the scholar Athanasius Kircher stated that the book had once belonged to Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who had paid 600 gold ducats for it, roughly $2 million today. Marci believed the book was written by Roger Bacon, the 13th century friar and scientist. This letter established the manuscript's provenance and sent researchers hunting for Bacon's secret knowledge. But Marci mentioned something else: additional letters and documents that had accompanied the book, explaining its contents. Those documents, Marci wrote, had been lost or destroyed years before. Carbon dating has confirmed the manuscript's parchment dates to the early 15th century, ruling out Roger Bacon. Modern analysis of the accompanying letter confirms it is genuine, but the lost documents Marci referenced have never been found. Cryptographers have spent over a century trying to decode the Voynich script. Every attempt has failed. Statistical analysis suggests it is not random gibberish, but follows linguistic patterns. Yet no one can determine what language it represents. The conspiracy theory is that the lost documents did exist and were deliberately destroyed because they unlocked the code. Some suggest the manuscript contains dangerous knowledge, medical, alchemical, or heretical, that the Jesuits suppressed. The letter survived as a taunt, proof that answers once existed. A sealed letter inside a sealed book, referencing lost letters that explained everything. The Voynich manuscript remains unread, and Marci's references to the vanished documents remain the cruelest clue. Case number 2, the Tesla missing papers. When Nikola Tesla died alone in the New Yorker hotel on January 7, 1943, the FBI moved quickly. Within hours, agents had seized his belongings, including multiple trunks of documents, notebooks, and sealed correspondence that Tesla had guarded obsessively for decades. The official story is straightforward. The Office of Alien Property took custody because Tesla was a naturalized citizen, and there were wartime concerns about his work falling into enemy hands. After examination, most papers were deemed of no significant value and eventually released to the Tesla Museum in Belgrade in 1952. Most papers, not all. Tesla's biographers have documented significant gaps in the released collection. References in his known correspondence mention specific projects: a death ray weapon, wireless power transmission over global distances, and experimental work on particle beams, for which no technical documentation has ever surfaced. The FBI's official position is that they found nothing of military significance. Yet declassified documents from 1945 show that MIT professor John G. Trump spent 3 days examining Tesla's papers and concluded they were primarily of a speculative, philosophical, and somewhat promotional character. Trump was a radar scientist who would later be consulted on particle beam weapons. Skeptics argued Tesla's later years were marked by grandiose claims and declining faculties. The missing papers, they suggest, were either destroyed by Tesla himself or simply never existed outside his imagination. Believers note that several Eastern European countries attempted to acquire Tesla's papers during the Cold War, suggesting they contained something of value. Sealed letters from Tesla to J.P. Morgan's heirs, discussing suppressed technologies, are known to have existed but remain missing. Tesla promised to change the world. He said the papers would prove it. 80 years later, we still do not know what the FBI found in that hotel room. Case number 1, the King Tutankhamun. Cursed letters. On November 26, 1922, Howard Carter made a small hole in the doorway of an Egyptian tomb and peered inside. When asked if he could see anything, he replied, "Yes, wonderful things." He had discovered the tomb of Tutankhamun, the most complete royal burial ever found in Egypt. Within months, strange deaths began. Lord Carnarvon, who financed the expedition, died from an infected mosquito bite in April 1923. His dog reportedly howled and dropped dead at the exact moment of his passing back in England. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, who x-rayed the mummy, died shortly after. The list eventually grew to over 20 names. What most people do not know is that Carter found sealed letters inside the tomb, correspondence between Tutankhamun's officials, placed there as part of the burial goods. Among them, according to Carter's initial field notes, was a papyrus document that his translator described as containing formalized protective curses against those who would disturb the king's eternal rest. This document has never been publicly displayed. Carter's notes reference it multiple times in 1923 and then never again. When pressed by journalists about the curse, Carter always denied its existence, calling the deaths coincidences and the curse Tommy rot. The skeptical explanation is compelling. Carnarvon was already in poor health. Many expedition members lived to old age, including Carter himself, who died in 1939 at 64. The curse was largely invented by newspapers selling copies, but Carter's original field notes are not entirely public. His personal correspondence from November and December 1922, the weeks immediately following the tomb's opening, was sealed by his family and remains in private hands. Howard Carter found something in that tomb that he chose not to discuss. The letters he left behind were sealed at his explicit request. The curse, he insisted until his final breath, was not real. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps he was hiding what he knew. The boy king has kept his secrets for 3,000 years. A few more decades change nothing.